Okay, so let the roll call show that all council members, excluding Susan Agar, are in attendance. She is joining us via Zoom. And we have the village manager / zoning administrator, Jim Dyer, with us here as well, and the clerk. Next item is approval of the council meeting minutes from, that must be for next. We have
It's not for.
tonight's meeting, we're approved the February 8th meeting minutes.
No, well,
We're supposed to, because it's the next meeting.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
think they were put in the Dropbox,
They-
unfortunately.
They were not?
No, I think we need to defer. it
Okay,
till
let's.
next-
That's why.
Let's not approve them.
Yeah,
Good idea. My mistake, I'm sorry about that.
No worries. So we'll skip that and we'll move to approval of the agenda, any amendments or additions.
move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Barb, supported by Hugh, all in favor, to approve the agenda as presented, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nays? All right, it's approved. Next item is the public hearing regarding 7th Street property, and so,
I think
So open the public.
yeah, so we're gonna open the public hearing at this time. And we're gonna have an introduction by the village manager / zoning administrator, Jim Dyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, what I'm going to do is run down what we, kind of a chronology of both the ownership of the property and things that have happened up to now. One of the things that I was asked to do by several citizens was basically to give this chronology. So for purposes of the record, the property was originally deeded to the village of Northport by deed of August 5th, 1941 from the Michigan, what was then the Michigan Department of Conservation, became the Department of Natural Resources, and then Department of Environmental Quality. This was tax reverted property. It wasn't a sale of property at arm's length. It's property where the taxes had not been paid, and at that time, all property that was subject to delinquent taxes those properties were collected by the state of Michigan rather than by local treasurers, as is the case today. That deed contained a deed restriction that the property was to be used solely for, quote, recreational purposes, close quote, and in violation of that would revert to the state. In addition to that, the state retained all mineral and mining rights, the rights to pipeline, the right to antiquity exploration, and the access to water courses and streams. Prior to 2018, the property was used as a village DPW garage and a storage facility for boats and other items that were also used by the DPW. This was likely contrary to the 1941 deed and reverter, but the state took no action to seek return of the property using the deed reverter clause described above. On January 4th, 2018, the Village Council, by resolution number 2, authorized an application to the state of Michigan to release the reversionary interest that the state had. And also to provide, and the resolution also stated to, quote, provide for distribution of funds from the subsequent sale of the property in question, close quote. About on June 27, 2018, we received a quitclaim reverter from the state of Michigan releasing the state's interest in the property. A subsequent email from the state of Michigan indicated that, confirmed that reverter released the ability, or released the village from the reverter clause, and indicated that the village could sell the surface rights for development purposes. It did not release the severance of the mining and subsurface rights, however, and that memo confirmed that. Following the release of the reverter, there were numerous approvals by the village council, for For example, on July 9th of 2019, there were surveys, a wetland delineation and a phase 1 environmental study that were approved by the village council. On October 8th of 2020, a phase 2 environmental was also authorized. The Planning Commission prepared a detailed memo regarding the 7th Street development timeline. And that is contained in the Dropbox that is under the Planning Commission, on the Planning Commission page, identified as 7th Street documents. And on the agenda tonight, I provided a link to that record. And that's this document right here that's got a number of the actions taken by council, village council votes, votes of the finance committee, minutes of the finance committee, and village council meeting minutes in some detail. Subsequent to that, on October 7th of 2021, there was a motion by the village council to quote, construct Maud Court, close quote. That motion was approved 6-1. The next month, on November 4th of 2021, there was an additional discussion regarding the 7th Street property, but in the minutes I could find no action taken by the village council. However, at the next meeting on December 9, 2021, there was a motion to quote, rescind the vote to construct Maud Court due to procedural error, close quote. That motion passed 7-0. In the minutes after that motion is recorded, there is a statement that says, quote, the council has asked the PC to review the 7th Street development project, close quote. There was no motion by the village council to specify what the planning commission would do other than to review it as indicated. But I personally don't find that to be any detriment to the planning commission's charge. Frankly, without a specific motion detailing what they were supposed to do, I think they took that as a fairly broad scope of duty, and they undertook it with, I would say, to call it anything other than vigorous undertaking would be to damn it with faint praise, because it was quite both a lengthy and a very, very thorough project, very thorough action that we took. Prior to the planning commission's review, however, there have been a substantial number of due diligence actions undertaken by the village for the purpose of potentially developing this property. As I indicated before, there were phase 1 and phase 2 environmental reviews. There was a hydrogeological study done, a wetland delineation, there were property surveys, there were appraisals of the property, and there were also stamped engineering plans for the construction of Maud Court that would have been submitted to Eagle had the December 2021 motion October 2029 motion not be rescinded in December. There is a very, very helpful document in the planning commission Dropbox, two actually. The first is what's called the report of documents available in Dropbox. It lists 21 documents that the planning commission gathered in its study of reviewed and gathered in its study of this problem. There is also a planning commission summary of work that indicates all of the things that the planning commission did from the time it received its charge in January 2022. It details the timeline of their actions, the process that they undertook, the criteria they considered in evaluating each proposed use of the property, and certain unresolved concerns. The interest in continued environmental study of the property, the interest in having the planning commission make a single recommendation or rank order of options, The planning commission decided not to take that action because it did not believe that it had been charged with doing so. And it was my instruction to the planning commission that they were not responsible for making a recommendation. That was something that was the sole province of the village council to determine the use and continued, either continued possession or sale of property owned by the village. I did recommend that we conduct a public hearing, and that's what we're doing today. There was also a comprehensive memo from the village attorney that addressed a report that was submitted by Attorney Gerald Schatz, and basically made some recommendations of what should occur if the property was to be developed. And that is also in the Dropbox. It looks like this. It's from dated July 15th of 2022 by then current village attorney Ross Hammersley. The end work product of the planning commission were 3 recommendations or evaluations, I think is the term that they decided to use, since they weren't particularly making recommendations as I indicated. The first recommendation was to preserve the land in its current state. The second was to, quote, use the 7th Street parcel in the discretion of the village, use that portion only. And the third parcel, or the third evaluation, was to use the 7th Street parcel in the discretion of the village and to sell 3 buildable lots to the north, on the north portion, going up North Shore Drive. As I indicated, these evaluations, which are also included in the Planning Commission Dropbox, are very comprehensive. They compare, they provide an overview of the recommendation and some funding suggestions. They do a comprehensive review of how each of these options aligns with the village master plan, its recreational plan, its zoning ordinance, and its and it does a comprehensive summary of the public comment that was made during the planning commission's process in determining what to do with this property. That's basically the introduction. As I indicated, I've reviewed most of the public record, and the documents that I've referenced are all in the first hyperlink of the documents. There's also a list of all the correspondence received by the planning commission or the village council prior to the planning commission concluding its review in, I think it was January of this year, where they actually concluded their review. And then there's additional documents that were placed in the Dropbox for tonight's meeting, primarily correspondence from various community members regarding, pro and con regarding the sale of the property. So that basically is is my introduction and the review of the records. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Could I just add note, because in the history, one thing that was left out that I think is important is that in addition to the green storage building at the old DPW site, there was also a fuel depot there for gasoline and diesel fuel, and it was just on a slab. It did not have a retention basin, and it was the opinion of somebody, one of the engineers, that was the source of the soil contamination we have in that section, which is fairly significant. If it was to be developed, it would need to be cleaned up.
Yeah, and I think that is addressed to some degree in the due diligence opinion from our village attorney, Ross Hammers.
Yeah, well,
It's addressed in that pretty thoroughly, I think, so.
okay, just wanted to bring it
That's
up.
that's absolutely a good note of consideration. And if there were to be any development of that portion, you'd certainly have to deal with that contamination. Yeah. There are no other questions. I guess you can proceed to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Next item would be our citizens' presentations. Giving two citizens 10 minutes each. The first we have up here is Joanne Swanson. Hello, good to see you in person.
It's good to see you as well. I have seen many of you at prior meetings and I've also submitted,
Could you come around here so that the.
And they'll be more likely to hear her too.
Yeah.
Actually, I should just take my seat here.
Oh.
You're not on camera.
Yeah, I'm not up there. We can't hear.
You're never on camera.
I'm never on camera.
No.
so I have been following this issue for 2.5 years. I've submitted many letters. I have made many public comments, all of which were designed to explain my opposition to any development of this property. And I cannot begin in the time allotted to identify and repeat all of the concerns that I have, but I trust that you either have or will review what's in the Dropbox, and in reading those letters, you'll get a good idea. I want to agree with Mr. Dyer that the Planning Commission did a very thorough and a job on evaluating these options, and also was very receptive, like unbelievably receptive to public comment. And I appreciated that greatly, particularly given where we came from when in the beginning, I don't know if I added this up correctly, but approximately or close to $100,000 had been spent to develop Mod Court without any of us on North Shore Drive, right across the street from the property, knowing anything about it. In fact, I was at my kitchen window doing dishes when I noticed for the first time that the property had been staked. Immediately went to my next door neighbor and said, hey, what's going on? And none of us really knew. So maybe that was our fault because there were meetings and there were minutes. However, it was during the pandemic and there was a period of time where I wasn't here for close to 6 months. So I'm on the tax rolls. You have my home address. It would seem that we would have been notified before decisions had been made. Anyway, I'm just going to try to highlight in the time allotted a few key points, probably more than a few, but the first one is that I think it has been suggested through these proceedings that the wetlands only exist on a portion of this property and the rest is amenable to development. And I disagree with that because that is not what the wetlands delineation report says. And I'm quoting that report when it says that wetlands exist, quote, across the entire parcel. So we're not talking about, only in this corner or only in that corner. It is throughout. And if you read the even the soil geological study, the water table is very high. And in fact, they talk about if you build, then you have to grade away from the foundation of that house. Well, if you grade away from the foundation of that house, where is it going to go? It's going to go across the street onto our properties as it heads to the bay, just like it already does. But so I just want to make that point that this is a wetlands property at approximately 6 acres, and it's designated as such by EGLE, by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey, by the Michigan Resource Information System, and also by the Leelanau County Soil Conservation District. So we're talking about wetlands. A second, and I say this very respectfully, because I know a lot of people have devoted a lot of time and a lot of work to this, but it is incredible to me that when we were all undercover and this was all proceeding, there was never any attempt to consult, at least that I perceive, to consult with the regulatory experts regarding the proposed development. And over the past 2 years, many of us have repeatedly urged the village to consult the experts before going any further down a path toward development. And I'm not a scientist, we're not hydrologists, we're not biologists, we're not water system experts. we need the experts to consult with, and I don't understand why we wouldn't do that. I did talk to Colin Ossie, who's with the Soil Conservation District, and I know Mary Beth Salt did as well. And he said he would be more than happy to lend his expertise to the discussion of this issue. I also talked to Robin Schmidt with Evel, and this is, I'm talking a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. She was willing to do a pre-screen for the village. But after an initial contact with the village, she was never asked to proceed. And many other experts have been suggested in correspondence and public comments, and I think we need to consult the experts. The wetlands delineation report identifies 3 or 4 regulatory bodies that are going to have to pass upon any development that occurs here. So I don't know why we would leave that as the last thing to do rather than initiate them at the outset. The third point I would like to make is that I think it is critically important for the council to develop a clear, targeted, transparent process for making this decision. If you've reviewed the public comments and communications, you will detect some public dismay at how this development had gone on at the outset without any public awareness. And as Mr. Dyer told me when I had a conversation with him and I said, how did this even get started? Like, what was the motivation for it? He said, well, that's not going to make any difference where we are right now. We are where we are. And I agree with that. And I think we do need to proceed from where we are, but it is a matter of trust. And so I think as you go forward in this important issue, that you need to let us know what your process, decision-making process is going to be and what your priorities are. And how you're going to define your priorities. Is it going to be, suggestions? What should our priorities be? I mean, I have no idea what the thought is on how you are going to make this decision, but I am going to ask you, will you consider climate science and environmental science and air and water quality impact? And how important is that going to be to you? Will you give regard to the wildlife that inhabits the area? Will you consult with the experts and let them make independent determinations, not predetermined? This is what we want to do. Help us to get to that result. But independent determination, is this what we should do? Or what should we do with this property? Will you consider your own master plan, which designates this area for public or quasi-public use? And also identifies among the goals of the village of Northport, protecting the natural beauty of the area, protecting the open spaces and the environmentally sensitive areas within the village, and also conserving our natural resources. And how will you balance the short-term economic imperative versus the long-term benefits that a forested area and wetlands provide to the community? And in this regard, I would like to refer you to about 4 or 5 articles I submitted with an email I sent to the Planning Commission, I believe, in April of 2023. It's all in the Dropbox. But the way a wetland works to filtrate water is very fascinating. And as one author wrote in one of the articles that I submitted, communities save big on water treatment by treating the rain where it falls, allowing natural filtration in the earth to strip away sediment and toxins. And I am concerned that the science of wetlands has not been investigated deeply enough in this decision-making process. And I urge you to educate yourselves and to take the time to make sure you understand the benefits of this valuable resource. Which brings me to a 4th point. It is no secret that many of us who have been following this issue will be directly impacted if development occurs in this area. I am right across the street from the lot on the northernmost portion of this property. That is designated wetlands all over the place. And Mary Betzel took photographs, submitted them to the planning commission. They're in the Dropbox of eight portals that empty into the bay through our properties, crossing and through our properties from this area across the street, the 7th Street property. The one next to my house is a big, huge culvert. It's photograph number 8. We've been asking, and to my knowledge, no one has investigated what is going to be the result of development on neighboring property owners. Several of us have already spent thousands of dollars to protect the foundations of our home and our crawl spaces from water intrusion. I did it before we even moved in. My neighbors on both sides have done it. And Mary, one of my neighbors, all I done is $20,000.
Yeah.
So how much is it going to cost the village to protect our properties? And are you willing to take the risk of not protecting our properties? Because I know, because I followed the minutes and followed the meetings, that the city has had enough recent experience with litigation and legal fees that I don't think it wants to go blindly in that direction without investigating the concerns that the people in the neighborhood have regarding their properties. My 5th point relates to affordable housing, and some have suggested that this area should be used for affordable housing and have even suggested that the village should donate the property for that purpose. Certainly, a housing development in this area is not going to be affordable by any stretch of the imagination, and we should not pretend otherwise, nor would this relatively small parcel have any significant impact on alleviating the workforce housing shortage. Although I haven't researched the issue, and Jim is probably very knowledgeable on this, I'm not even sure that providing a workforce housing for private employers is a consideration that is within the bailiwick of the village, but I'm going to assume that it is. I believe there are other parcels of property that can be used for this purpose. And I'll ask you directly, what other parcels of property not environmentally sensitive does the village own? And is the village investigating for workforce housing and to alleviate the housing shortage? As far as I know, there are plans, because I, again, learned this at a meeting, I think it was the planning commission meeting, that there is a development that is planned for the golf course that will include affordable housing. And I understand that the mixed use development that's being planned for the hospital site will also include affordable housing. So I don't see why you would not consider other alternatives rather than decimate this environmentally sensitive area for housing purposes. My 6th point is just asking you,
Just so you know, we are going on like about 13 minutes.
can I just have?
Yeah, I'll let you wrap it up.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I am so sorry, but
I lost track there where I couldn't see
Thank
the clock. But
thank you. I'll try to. So I'm just asking you to use common sense, because you are the stewards of this property, and cutting down trees in a tree city, filling in wetlands, destroying wildlife habitat, and inhibiting a naturally occurring process for carbon absorption, water filtration. So a few McMansions can be built is not what Northport is all about. It's not prudent, and it is not reasonable, and I would refer you to Sutton's Bay, where they did alter wetlands, and they are now paying the price for that. And in fact, their planning commission has proposed an ordinance to protect wetlands within the city, so this does not occur again. 7th, you'll see a letter from a lawyer, and I know Jim referred to this, regarding release of the reverter. And Jim did a good job at describing it, but one thing that is missing is both the original deed from the state of Michigan as well as the quitclaim deed. And you have to go by the deed, not by what the state of Michigan says by the deed, because the language of the deed is the document. And the deed says it's being conveyed for public purpose. And I guess I'm wondering, how is it a public purpose to sell the property to a private developer for subdividing for housing? I just question that as a public purpose. And the final point I would make refers to the contamination. We've known for 4 years that there is contamination on the corner, in that section on the corner of 7th Street and North Shore Drive. It's a stone's throw from a public beach at the end of 7th Street. And according to your reports, it contains toxins, including naphthalene, lead, and zinc, in excess of levels that are permitted for soil and groundwater. Why don't we take care of this? Irrespective of what's going to happen to the property, we should not be letting these toxins reach into the bay. And I know in the Dropbox, there is a brownfield or a discussion of a brownfield application. And I know that was investigated, but I don't see any indication that it was ever finalized or submitted. And I am wondering why. And the final point I would like to make has to do with the appraisals of the property. The assumption of the appraisals, if you read through them, is that there is no contamination on the property and that there is no, I think they called it detrimental environmental condition. And this property contains both. It contains contamination and the wetlands are in environmentally detrimental conditions. So I don't think those appraisals, which simply looked at comparative properties and didn't consider these conditions on the property, are even valid. I don't see how they can be. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Joe.
Excuse me, Chris,
Yeah,
can you clarify for us what the time limits are on comments? I know we have a lot of people who want to comment tonight.
yeah, so the presentations are 10 minutes. And then public comment is gonna be 3 minutes per person.
And why do the presentations get 10 minutes and others get 3?
Well, I'm not gonna get into that right now, but we're allowing 2 people to present each side.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. That helps. Thank you.
All right, next up is Christy Fisher. Are you on Zoom, Christy?
I don't know if she is.
Oh, okay.
She told me she might go to the planning commission meeting instead of this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when I talked to her last night, she was on the fence of whether she's
If,
coming. I don't know if she knew
Well,
she was
because
on the agenda.
it's her planning commission,
Yeah, I know.
so,
I
okay.
I did ask her to be present. She had agreed to do so, but perhaps had other things come up. If you would like, I can just read her letter into the record. I think
Sure.
that'd be
Yeah.
a way
Yeah,
to do
that's
it.
fine. Let's do that.
Subject: urgent action needed to utilize 7th Street property for affordable housing. Dear Village Council, I hope this letter finds you well. As a concerned resident of the Village of Northport, I'm writing to express my deep concern regarding the fate of the 7th Street property currently under discussion by the council. I recently helped draft a letter from the Leelanau Township Community Foundation, but I feel this matter deserves more than one letter of support. I strongly urge you to consider utilizing the vacant property for potential housing projects, which our community greatly needs. The 7th Street property presents a unique opportunity to address the critical issue of a lack of housing of all types in our community. While I understand the council's consideration of selling the property for profit or turning it into overflow parking, I believe that prioritizing the long-term well-being of our community should take precedence. By dividing the property into 2 lots for housing projects and leaving the other 2 heavily wooded lots untouched, we can strike a balance between environmental preservation and meeting the pressing needs for affordable housing. I have personally sat on countless meetings and discussions on housing, and I see that this as a chance for local leaders to stop talking about it. I run out of, sorry about that. Stop talking about it and dancing around it and take concrete steps. The longer we wait to address this need, the further behind we are and the harder it becomes to be a thriving year-round community. I've also sat on countless meetings and make it clear that if Northport puts up the property, there are enough interested housing groups that might step forward and take on such a project. There is also a lot of money from the state and federal governments that are available or will become available, and if we aren't ready for that opportunity for grant money, we will miss it. Furthermore, it is important to note that the Seventh Street property currently does not generate tax revenue for the community. Therefore, utilizing it for housing would not result in any loss to the village. On the contrary, it presents an opportunity for the community to gain numerous benefits. Any form of housing, apartments, duplexes, triplexes, etc., could attract year-round residents or house current residents that get displaced seasonally. I implore you to consider the potential positive impact that utilizing the 7th Street property for housing could have on our community. By taking this step, the council could not only address a critical need, but also demonstrate a commitment to the well-being and prosperity of Northport. This decision would set an example for other communities facing similar challenges and showcase our village as a leader in innovation and inclusive housing solutions. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. I trust that you will carefully consider the importance of housing and the unique opportunity presented by the 7th Street property. I look forward to witnessing the council's commitment to creating vibrant and inclusive communities in Northport. Yours sincerely, Christy Fisher. And to kind of answer Trustee Ager's question about why the presentations were allotted a little bit more time, I knew based upon conversations with Swanson and with Christy, and we would get a very comprehensive presentation of numerous issues that would give a broad impact or show the broad impact of both sides of this issue to the council. And I thought it would be a good thing to exempt or to expand the time for the presentation to allow that to occur. So that's the reason.
Thanks, Jim.
And as also you can see on the agenda, I also indicated a time for public questions, which normally we don't take from public comment, but that we can use to expand the data that the council currently has regarding this issue. And more importantly, even if the council doesn't think it needs additional information, it gives us the ability as staff and as council to convey information to the public that informs the decisions that are being made, which I think is essential as well, to be as inclusive as possible. And I use that word because I really don't like to use the word transparency. It has a loaded implication that I don't care for. That's just my personal feeling.
Okay. All right, thank you. So that brings us to item E, that's public comment. And so members of the public will be given 3 minutes to speak. And I can start with the folks here in person if you'd like to raise your hand or be recognized. Go ahead. And I should please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Ruth Butler Arts. I live at 10604 North Shore Drive. I've followed this process for whatever it's been, 8, 10, 15 years, but it's actually only been 2.5, which has been very long. I want to commend the Planning Commission for the work they did. I sat through many of your meetings and wondered how in blazes you live a regular life because you had so much work to do. Thank you for that. When I started looking at this, I was trying to find, because the question arose at a village council meeting, when did the council initially approve this project? And I culled through minutes, planning commission minutes, village council minutes, and found nothing about that. And I know we're at a different, here we are, whatever happened, happened. Here we are, but what that did was stick in my craw as somebody was pulling a fast one. Maybe not, but I couldn't find the evidence. So I'm letting it go. I vented, I'm letting that go now. And let's move from here. But I just want you to know that that really was a trust thing that I felt violated. The other thing I'd like to say is the public use of this land, which is in the deed, the public use. And I was for subdividing some of it for smaller housing, but if we're allowing developers to buy 2 lots to build, there are tons of places in Northport for the mega houses. You seem to have other properties that might be better for so-called affordable housing because it might be a little bit bigger and not have the wetlands issue and the wooded issue. And I'd like to hear that answer sometime about what other properties are there. So, and for the public use part, my dream is this becomes a nature habitat for the education of our students. I have a sister-in-law who does this with her fourth graders. They adopt a wooded area near the school. They go and tend it. They learn about the native plants. It's there. They show ownership for it. And and that's a great public use. You don't even have to buy swing sets. It's the nature of Northport and Leelanau. And I would love if that were an opportunity for them then to learn, and that's public use. And our kids are smart.
Thank you.
Answer a question for Ruth?
Okay.
Was that a question? Is this a question? No, not now. It's not.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is
Just
public
a
comment.
comment. Okay.
Yeah, just comment, we'll take the question during the public question. Mike?
Yeah, I'm Mike Stoffel, 654 Mill Street. I've been here about 50 years. My wife and her family own the property next door to the village, DPW. I believe, my personal opinion, I've walked all that property. I look at North Shore on the west side, it's all developed. You look at South Shore on the west side, it's all developed, and the west side of South Shore was definitely all wetlands. There's no two ways about it, but it's still developed. We need housing in the area. That's my personal opinion. But I think the village should sell that property to get it developed. That's just my personal opinion, along with a couple other people. And take that money and put it towards our sewer that we continually say that we need money to pay off the sewer. Let's take that money. Don't put it in the general fund. Let's put it on the sewer and let's see if we can get that property developed. I think we need it. I don't think it needs to be a leftover boat trailer spot like it had pretty much. And I don't believe it should be the dump that it's turning into once again. And that's why my wife sold her property she had down there, is because the village kept dumping one thing after another on that property next to ours. And we continually had to fight the village with our survey because they kept encroaching. They were putting trailers on our property. And it was an endless battle. And finally we said enough's enough and we sold it. And now I notice every time I drive by there, there's another pile of dirt, another pile of wood chips and everything else. I thought that's what 8th Street was for. Anyway, that's my opinion. I'd like to see it develop.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Betzel, Mary Cermak Betzel, and I have a home on 10540 North Shore Drive. And I am directly affected by the wetlands that are behind me, and I am opposed vehemently to any development in that wooded area. To us, those of us that live on that side of the road and have inherited property family from 80 years ago, we live with it, and we have spent a lot of money on our property and keeping it safe. That property should be left alone. And Bob Newell had the best suggestion, and quote me if I'm wrong, that at a planning commission meeting, when all of it was being discussed, this man came up with the best idea that no one has followed up on. He said simply, why don't we just plant trees there we have so many new trees that are native now to northern Michigan. Why don't we reforest that whole section that is now empty and call it good? Am I right? Okay. I didn't want to misquote you, dear, but it's so simple. When you tear down trees and destroy woodlands, it's criminal. I don't see how any of you could sleep at night if you destroyed those woodlands and those wetlands. I really think in this day and age, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, sure, Pops built a house on it. He didn't care. But now we have, if you look at those pictures, those 8 openings. And when I talked to Colin Ossie, he said, you'd have to have an Army Corps of Engineers come in there to change the topography of the land to be able to put anything back there, let alone buildings or houses. So I am vehemently against any selling of the property, especially to a developer who can do pretty much what they want and you would have no control over it. I am for leaving it alone, and I like Bob's plan. Let's reforest it. I'll buy the first tree. I will. And it would be nice too. I would also add a sign. And I would put it, this property is the wetlands and forests of Northport, developed by or given to the people of the community. Is to put a sign in there and say what it is. Why is this here? But you start cutting down trees and you're gonna rile a lot of people. Right? That's my say for this evening.
All right, thank you, Mary. Bob?
Yeah, Bob Newell, 415 Chappellson. I'm not here as a planning commissioner or tree commission person. I'm here as a resident. I would like to see it, you're being asked to select one of 3 evaluation options here. And I'm going to recommend going with 1 because I'd love to see that 100% passive green space. However, I'm thinking that you're probably going to end up going with number 2, which is the 7th Street as future development. What I would like to ask is, whatever you do on 7th Street, I would like to see, if you're going to do development, that it come before the planning commission and be evaluated as thoroughly as 7th Street parcel overall is being evaluated tonight and in the recent past. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Chris, can I add something?
I'm gonna try to get through everybody.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, all right. Anybody in Zoom would like to make a public comment? If you unmute yourself or use the little hand raise thing.
Hi, Chris, this is Sue Manson.
Okay, Sue, fire away.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank Joanne Swanson for such a thorough representation of all of those of us who are against the development of the 7th Street property. One of my points is that I know the village and the planning commission are so proud of having a tree city, and we have signs and we brag about it. But at the same time, we're even considering taking down this old growth of wetlands. That makes 0 sense to me. Also, the contamination is a big concern to me. I've talked to people on the village council as well as to Chris about DPW Chris about the contamination. The water from that area where DPW used to be, when it rains, it is like a waterfall that comes directly onto our property and 5 inches into our garage. So I'm assuming that that is contaminated water. And I know you say if that is to be sold, then that will have to be remediated. But I think it needs to be remediated now, because I have no doubt that's going into the bay. There's no doubt, because you can see it runs like a river, and we can't get to our mailbox. I have to put on boots because the water there on that little section of 7th Street is over my shoes. So that's something that I have a question about it. I have a statement about it. I really wish we would do that. Take care of it. My next thing is, it looks like a dump there now. The boats that are parked there, the piles of stuff. Now there are branches that are collected. And this is such a great village. It amazes me that we are using that very visible parcel and treating it like a dump. It's like right down the street from me. And how the people on 7th Street tolerate it on down further, I don't know. I just don't know why we are allowing that to happen. My other thing is, if that were turned into housing, the traffic would be really unreasonable. Because unless you live right here, you don't know how busy this street is, and the corner from 7th Street with people turning both directions is very busy, and I think that should definitely be taken into account. However, I'm definitely supporting number 1, and Bob Newell's idea to reforest that is splendid. That's my opinion. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sue.
Uh-huh.
Fred, did you want to speak? I thought I saw you unmute. Go ahead, Fred. I can't hear you, but,
Yes, I'm here.
okay, sorry.
Well, of course, I've been observing this for about 3 years now. And, well, you all know my opinion that I didn't think the village should be the developer. That I felt that, all the groundwork was done properly. The environmental studies, John Corr is an excellent, surveyor and well-known from Gosling Zubek. I think they did a great job. I think the 4 lots, I think, are very buildable. That's a beachhead, folks, by the way. It's not a swamp. Obviously down where Mary is and the rest of them, none of that's gonna be disturbed. It's a delineated wetland, okay? And they even provide an off-street cul-de-sac down there if you wanna go wading in there in the water with your bare feet, fine. I think the village needs some more residential lots. They're perfect. I think the setbacks are great. Not cutting down any trees for 30 feet. Anyway, make a long story short, my end comment is I approve of the 4 lots. To all of you listening tonight, and I know a number of you, I would like you to take a little drive down South Shore Drive in Northport. And I'd like you to observe what is legally not a wetland and people are building on. One of them's on stilts. So compared to what we're talking about here on North Shore, this is an R2 district. I said low-keyed, residential, 4 new houses. The impact is minimal. And the wetland is preserved, and the conservation area, the wetland, is available for anybody that wants to walk on it. They put a cul-de-sac in there. So I strongly approve continuing the process. It adds more RUs to our sewer, it adds more taxes to our village, and it encourages some more new village residents. So I'm strongly supportive of the original proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Looks like Tom Weber has his hand up.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much. Tom Weber. I live on South Shore Drive. A couple of people have mentioned some construction that's going on down there, and who, as somebody who does a lot of sustainable design, etc., just because it's going on does not necessarily make it right. Yes, there's a lot of foundation and pier footings on one particular lot, which really is basically swamp area, should not have been permitted, but was allowed to go through. I object to that. But in terms of the 7th Street, I think that the village has a real opportunity, and I'm going to echo what so many other people have talked about, to really sort of put their money where their mouth is and say, if you go up to the recycling area, there's a collection bin for 10 cents because the village wants to plant more trees. Okay, if we want to be sort of in the forefront of being a green village and a green space, let's return that to its natural environment. Plant some of the trees that might be more endangered. Use it as a teaching tool for the school and for other schools in the area to come in and see what reclamation of what was once an industrial area can be by returning it to a wetlands, a filter system, something that which is going to protect our Great Lakes and our ecosystem. I think the village really needs to strongly consider putting the environment over profit. The profit in terms of restoring it to an environmentally sustainable lot, I think will have outwin anything that you're going to get from 3 or 4 houses. So we really need to be conscious of how we are going to treat our environment and how we're going to portray ourselves, not only to the residents of the village of Northport, but as well to Leelanau County. Let's make sure people want to come back because they know that we protect the environment. Thanks, you guys. I'm going to be listening.
Thanks, Tom. Anne has her hand up, it looks like.
Thanks very much. Like others before, I want to thank the Planning Commission for the excellent work that they put in on this issue. I have written to them in the past my concerns. I wrote a letter that was published today in the Leelanau Enterprise expressing those concerns. And I think that Joanne Swanson did an outstanding job of summarizing the many points that I totally agree with. Since Joanne's comments came before Christy Fisher's, I think I might address the housing issue, since I think everyone knows that I'm totally on board with 100% natural state environmental preservation. But I think that the village has really got itself mixed up on the housing issue. We do need to think along the lines of comprehensive overview of what we're going to do about housing. We have a very unique situation being at the very tip of the peninsula. And it makes it complex to think about. And I would hope that we wouldn't just do a one-off decision on this one parcel without having a comprehensive view of what it is we most need to do in the area, perhaps of promoting affordable housing. And promoting that does not necessarily mean that we build it. It means that we have the right zoning ordinances in place that will encourage it. It means working cooperatively with those in the private sector who may be eligible to obtain various helping hands from government subsidies and so on and so forth. I do know that unfortunately, affordable housing is a big business in big cities. And it takes a big piece of property to make it actually pay for a developer to build something. This little piece of property is not there. It's not going to be attractive to somebody who's trying to make their money from building affordable housing. There's some very legitimate people out there trying to make money by building affordable housing, but this parcel is particularly not suited for that. And in addition, it has all these environmental issues that have been well discussed tonight. So I urge the council to hold on to this property, to preserve the property, signage, whatever you want to do about preserving it and making it look less unsightly than it is right now would be a great addition. And to work in the long run toward a comprehensive affordable housing plan, not just a one-off, well, we have a piece here, let's try to plop something in. Thank you very much for your time. As always, I really appreciate the hours you spend considering the public interest.
Thanks, Anne.
I was gonna say, I just saw there was a message from Strike on there.
Did anyone else in Zoom want to make a public comment? I see Bonnie is unmuted, Robert Swanson's unmuted.
I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Robert Swanson. Would like to thank Joanne Swanson for her compelling comments on the matter. Thanks for some work being done here. Great to see local government in action. Would also just like to respectfully disagree with one previous gentleman. I would hardly describe lots with contaminated soil as perfect. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I
Bonnie?
would, yeah,
Yeah.
I would just like to throw my support behind the idea that the village consider selling those lots that are buildable. I just think the greater benefit is there for the village to realize the income from the sale of the lots and the tax revenue that could be that will be generated, and also the increased usage of the sewer, even though it might not lower the costs of the sewer, the increased flow is going to be better for the system. I think that the environmental protections of the property are important and can be considered, but I do think that the village would be better off. We would all be better off as a whole for our village if we would to sell them for buildable, single family, hopefully year-round residents that could occupy those lots. So that's my feeling.
Thanks, Bonnie. Anyone else?
I want to look to see what the comments are. Somebody wrote something.
Oh, it was somebody echoing something Tom
Oh,
Weber said.
okay.
He lived on South Shore also, I think.
Yes,
Striker Thomas. Okay, so hearing no more public comment.
Chris, I
Oh,
will. I just
oh,
want to wait
okay,
for everyone,
okay.
because of my role on the planning commission. So actually, I'll probably just read.
Name and manager.
Thank you. Nicole Arbery, 10915 North Shore, part of the North Shore crew here. As you know, I've spent considerable time on this project on behalf of the village, but I've also spent a good deal of time thinking about this property as a neighbor and caretaker of very similar woods just down the street. I walk, bike, or drive by this property nearly every day. As chair of the PC throughout this project, I spent my time focused on the best interests of the village. And one thing I'll say, and we talked about it, not once throughout this whole, all of this work, did we ever speak about our personal preferences. As I've said before, our collective work really is on behalf of the village council in an advisory role. A little side note, and you'll hear me in a bit, a little bit of a different view than Bob. This is part of the reason we didn't go on for another month or two to come to a consensus. It didn't make a difference whether we agreed on it because these are the decision makers. So that's one of the things. But we didn't know even while we were doing this. I don't think we had any idea who fell in what camp on this. Anyway, tonight's my opportunity to speak on my own behalf, and as a resident and close neighbor of this parcel for 23 years, I believe the village council should choose option 2 for the following reasons. First, I believe protecting the wetlands is extremely important, and therefore doing nothing with the back part of the property, or doing anything with the back part of the property, should be off the table. Not only are the wetlands of vital importance, but that stretch of woods is a tremendous asset and resource worth protecting. And you've heard a lot of that before, and I won't go into all the things I learned from Catherine Frericks about the life of trees and just strategically where that chunk of woods is as you come from the north. If you're a bald eagle or whatnot coming along the lake shore, it does give a nice little jumping spot. And so I think the woods, in addition to the wetlands, all that. And I also will say, for the record, I don't think at any time in this process there was anyone on the planning commission who questioned at all the value of the wetlands. And so in some ways, I think that's why we didn't go a whole lot further. I think, and I'm just speaking for myself, but as chair, I never had anyone implore me, we need more information. Is it really worth saving these wetlands? That was never part of the consideration. So that's part of that. Anyway, I'll move on. I do think this area can be protected while still utilizing the southwest portion of the parcel. That's the west end that's fronting 7th Street. Even after accounting for the lift station and the portion that has contamination, there is area to the west near the former railroad, right on 7th Street, that is a little more high and dry. It doesn't have the same, although there may be this designation of the whole area, as people said, all along North Shore and South Shore. But in terms of, you know, having walked that land and it during the spring when the vernal pods, that west section. And so I do think there's some room there. So in my opinion, this is a reasonable location for developing just a couple of housing units. I would agree with Ann and some others who have said this isn't going to be a site that's going to accommodate something larger initiatives like a home stretch. They do look for 8 to 10 units or whatnot. But there are partners out there, perhaps a Habitat or something like that, Habitat for Humanity, looking at just 2 units. Another thought that I've been thinking about is if you walk up and down 7th Street, there's such a wide variety of homes that I don't think something fitting in or not fitting in. If you think at one end, you have a single wide abandoned mobile home, at the other end, a state-of-the-art mansion and everything in between from 500 square feet on. So I don't think that's an issue. And what do we have, an eclectic architectural vernacular? Is there, I have to figure out what our wording is on our architectural. Anyway, again, while it's not the right location for bigger initiatives, I know there are partners. I believe the other advantage, I believe this option 2 gives you an opportunity to address a variety of needs with this parcel, environmental protection and the need for attainable housing. Also, by choosing the option 2, it gives you the opportunity to take this on in phases, taking action immediately on protecting the sensitive area, sensitive land being discussed, while giving you the opportunity to further evaluate what you would like to do with that front portion. You know, if you take that decision to go with option 1 and leave it all in the natural state, it doesn't give you further options. This gives you further options, one of them being after you go through your further evaluation, you could go back and say, you know, we're not going to develop that. But option 2 gives you that opportunity. Lastly, I'll say, and I think I heard that in Christie's letter, I've said in meetings, webinars, Zoom meetings with many of you over the past few years, there's no question about the need for housing. It's just a question of will. I know the size is small and this is surely not going to solve any big picture challenges, but it will make a difference for a couple of lucky families who might be able to join our community. Thanks for your consideration.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay.
Last comment, and I agree with this lady here, you know. I don't think we need any kind of apartment thing in there. I think we should stick with 7th Street, the residential part, put a couple homes on the front part and leave everything else in the back alone. And I think it'd be a 50-50 solution for everybody. And the other thing is I'd like to put in is if we do have residential homes put in there, let's start putting a stop on this short-term rental stuff. I mean,
Yeah, let's keep it to the,
yeah,
I'm just gonna stop you so we can get into the public questions and
Yeah.
you already had your chance for public comment, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is F, public questions.
Yeah, I would indicate during the discussion, I identified at least 3 questions that were kind of raised, and I can address those specifically. One was, when did the council initially approve proceeding with the sale? That was on January 4th of 2018, and I can provide minutes of that meeting if you have any interest in that, but.
That's what I was gonna say. There's a whole
Yeah.
document that you refer to with all of those dates, Ruth.
Yeah,
every
I just
time.
never heard that date. I never heard that
okay.
council approved, and even council members didn't know it.
Yeah.
So thank you, I'd love to see that.
Well, wait a minute. Not, you know,
Thank you.
we should, not to bring up the past, but, I asked repeatedly at meeting after meeting and was yelled at by a former employee when they couldn't find what I was asking for. When the council approved the engineering study that actually laid out the cul-de-sac and all that, which cost, I think, $17,000. That was, you show me where we voted on that, because we never did.
That's a different issue.
Oh, okay,
In
but
fact-
that's what really got, I think this is what Mary was talking about and what Ruth was talking about, was that money was spent without council approval and without a vote. And that was a dark time in this whole chapter, in my opinion, but that should not be ignored. I was furious about it at the time. I was called a liar for bringing it up at the time, and turns out I was right. And that employee is no longer here.
All right, your point's been made. Jim?
Thank you.
The second question was, what other affordable housing options are available? And the best answer that I can give to that is we're currently exploring that. And I believe at our next meeting, we'll have some further information about that, but we will not at this point necessarily be identifying any specific locations because that, you know, some of them are privately owned, some of them are publicly owned. One of the real advantages of public ownership, if there was property that was owned by the village or the township, say, for example, because it doesn't have any development on that property at the current time, you can use what's called a tax increment financing mechanism because not right now it has nothing on it, so you've got a baseline of 0. If you put a development on that, you can use what's called tax increment financing to fund some of those things like connection to the sewers and things like that that are cost prohibitive for doing a larger development like that. So that is definitely being explored very actively. And I think there was another question asked of whether there would be development review by the planning commission for any thing that might be developed on this property. The answer to that would be yes. There would be a requirement for site plan review. The first step is the issuance of a land use permit by the zoning administrator. And that process also, in all likelihood, because it's more than a single building, would require a full site plan review, and the planning commission would be involved with that. So if there are any other questions, we can try to address them as well.
Sure.
Can, if you sold it all and put that money not in the general fund, but put it toward the sewer, would it matter? Really, in the long run? It's a short-term thing, but would that be enough money to make a dent in this? I mean, I just have heard that and I just wonder if that would even help.
First of all, probably not.
Yeah.
And I think those that are council members that are on the NLTUA board will concur with that. The other thing is the ordinance essentially says, even though the village doesn't always do this because it has to contribute general fund dollars. You're not supposed to be contributing general fund dollars to the sewer. It's supposed to be self-supporting. So that's a potential restriction as well. But
So even if you sold it, you couldn't put the money there necessarily.
that's a possibility.
The way it's written now, no.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions or?
Chris, Fred,
Well, there's two people.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, Fred, go ahead.
I just wanted to tell you all, the audio tonight seems to be much improved.
Oh, that's good.
Good.
Did you change something?
I've been able to understand it.
No. Jim said it's because he's talking louder.
You are talking louder though. Like I know.
Thank you.
Question. What is going to happen hereafter? What are the next steps going to be?
That's going to be.
How
well,
is this issue going to be?
The next
decided?
step is, the council will do it, is have a discussion tonight. As I told you, I didn't anticipate there would be any vote tonight.
I understand.
That will come at a later time, but I would assume that at one point in time or another, because again, the planning commission specifically said they weren't making recommendations, but
Right.
even if it was a recommendation, anything coming from the planning commission, even on a land use basis, the village council can accept, reject, modify, send back to the planning commission for study. All of those things are on, yeah, and I saw Nicole just went, yeah.
We all did.
But I don't anticipate that happening, but it's within the realm of possibility, so it's very difficult to give a specific answer to that question.
I'm not
But
necessarily saying when is it going to be decided, but how? What is the process that's going to be used to decide?
it'll be a decision by this village council, and it's kind of hard to tell you what will be the process until we know. And it's the same thing I had in my conversation with you. And also with respect, again, the wetlands delineation is a good example. First of all, that would have to be done again if there was any development. It would have to be done again, number one. And if we were to do a specific development, that would dictate what kind of delineation we would need to do. So what I've suggested to my council members is that we would, based upon the sense that we gather today, I'll be giving them a proposal as to these are the next steps that we need to do, but until that sense is conveyed, I can't really give an answer to that question.
Yeah, and I guess, kind of where I'm going is if there is an inclination to accept a proposal or one of the options that lead to development, don't you need to talk to the regulatory bodies? Don't you need, I mean, why wouldn't you allow them to do a
Yes, in
pre-screen
fact-
or come in and give you? Because maybe you're going to be going down a road where there's a big, stop sign and the regulatory bodies are going to say no. And wouldn't it be a good idea to know that? Because not only is it a wetlands, it's also within 500 feet of a Great Lake. So I mean, you have two reasons.
In fact, one of the documents that's in the Dropbox is an engineered plan, had we proceeded with the Mod Court building and the 4 units that were proposed, that was stamped and ready to submit to Eagle. So yes, that would occur, but it's the sense that I'm getting is fairly clear that that plan, as engineered, is dead in the water. So there's no way to really access even a pre-screening with a regulatory agency. I've done quite a lot of land use development in my career, and that would be extremely premature at this point. They're regulators.
To me, it seems premature to hire engineers to design plans and to come up with a whole development before you even have advice from the regulatory agencies as to whether, and
Do you know
showed me
Colin
Kalinowski.
Osik?
We're asking questions, not a dialogue back, but here's the thing. Like I said, I've been involved in for 35 years in real estate development. What happened in this instance is exactly what happens with every developer that's going to do a project. They start with where they want to go. They do that kind of thing with their engineers, their consultants, environmental and hydrogeological, land use planning. That's exactly what they do.
But to me, that's making a decision about where you want to go before you have input from the experts. And my request to this council is to allow your experts to be independent. Don't say this is what we want to do, but have them tell you what is the best use of this property and what are the pros and cons of this property. I'm not trying to get another comment.
I will guarantee you that is not what Eagle does. They don't tell you what's the best use of a property.
Well, then they're independent experts. I'm not saying you have to be only wedded to Edel but to me, I mean, what is a pre-screen? And what is Kalinowski has a list of 10 things on his website as to what he's willing to do to help communities and so on.
There are certainly opportunities for that. And if we got to, I don't think we're anywhere near that point right now. We're nowhere near that point. Because it's very clear that the engineered project that we had in mind is dead in the water.
There might, one that you read through the things that have happened, the timeline, was there mentioned in the meeting that you voted out Mod Court? What date was that?
December.
December.
It
Yeah.
wasn't mentioned.
It was.
No,
Yes,
it's-
it was.
I've got it in the notes.
December 2021.
20?
She's talking, that was the rescinding of putting in Mod Court. She's talking about when we took off option number 4.
Yes, that's what I want to know.
Yeah, and that
Oh,
did
that
happen.
was that was January 23
Right.
at the village.
Okay,
council
that's what I was
meeting.
asking,
Okay.
not the other, that was there. But I know Will raised his hand and everybody voted and
Yep.
number 4 went off the table.
Yeah.
So that's not even,
That was at the January 23 village council
Yes.
meeting. The planning commission went to the village council to update on where we were in our process and to verify what our charge was. And they agreed our charge, but at that point, option 4 was taken.
That was
out.
January 2023, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
That's years old.
There was another question asked about brownfield redevelopment, and I know it was Jane Gale on behalf of the Planning Commission had a meeting with Trudy Gale, and somebody asked, why didn't we pursue that? And that's in the same category that Jim's talking. You have to have a plan in place before you go to them, and you can't go to them and say, will it work in advance? So that's why that wasn't pursued further.
So isn't cleaning up the property sufficient
You have to have,
plan to?
no, you have
No,
to,
you have
go
to-
ahead, Jane, you
It's
probably.
gotta be
Well,
connected with
you have
building
to-
something on it?
Yes.
Or that you're going to naturalize it or whatever.
Yeah,
We
you have to
have
have a
learned
plan.
that it doesn't have to be building something, but that you do have to say what you're going to do for
I'll
them to
give you-
look at
I'll
it.
give you a good
Yeah.
example of that. When I was past city attorney for the city of Marshall, we had an issue with whether we would take out, or we had a failing dam, a very significant failing dam that formed a very large lake. And we knew we couldn't afford to pay for the dam replacement. And we ended up doing the environmental study that showed what was, if we eliminated the dam, we would uncover friable heavy metals that were frankly better embedded in silt covered by water. And that's ultimately what Eagle told us to do. And we ended up getting $1 million grant to fix the dam instead of removing it. And so that kind of thing is that's why you really don't get that kind of evaluation until you know what it is you're going to do with the property.
There was a sort of a question during the public comment about making it free use for the schools for an outdoor classroom or learning center. And the school has an outdoor classroom on West
Yeah,
Street.
they do.
So that, good for Northport, they already have one accessible.
But that does raise the question of, assuming, for example, if the council were to accept either option 1 or 2, that would raise the question of what do you do with the area of the property that is going to be left wild or whatever? What do you do with that, and how do you assure that it is, that a subsequent council doesn't change that decision?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, that's one of the things in conversations with trustee Harper. I said, if I were to be directed today to explore either of those 2 options, that's one of the first things that I would take a look at is how do we really preserve that property if that's ultimately the decision? What would be the best means of doing so?
I
Should you
have thoughts
dedicate
on
it as a
that.
park?
Yeah, I mean, I have
Yeah.
thoughts on that, but.
Wait
I'm
a
thinking it
second,
could
wait
be
a
village
second.
Council discussion.
Yeah,
Wait
kind
a
of what council's
second.
saying too.
I'm seeing
Oh,
all the,
question.
I'm seeing all the chit chat from the Zoomers and they feel left out of this question session. Can we allow them to pose some
Oh,
questions?
sure, okay, looks like, yeah, sorry. Kay's got her hand up, Tom Weber's got a hand up. We can't see the chat, just so everybody knows.
Right.
We were just engaging here, so, Kay, was
Yep.
everyone's question answered? Sorry.
Yep,
Well,
hi.
actually, it's Patrick. I have a question.
Oh, okay.
I haven't heard anything, and I've heard Mr. Dyer and others talk about dividing it, selling it, using it for private property, but has there been and the pollution issues came up, has there been a phase 1, phase 2 on this property?
Yes.
Yes, both.
Both.
Okay, and that report is in the package?
Yes.
Okay,
In the
And what
7th
is it-
Street Dropbox.
what does it show?
It's a little
Yeah.
complicated to summarize that, but it does show contamination. It does show issues that would need to be addressed. And there's also, again, the memo from Village Attorney Hammersley discusses in detail steps that would need to be taken to address those issues.
Okay, so before you have a sale to private property owners, you're gonna have to mitigate that problem, right?
Not necessarily.
You would leave that up to the person who's buying the property?
That's a potential outcome, yes.
So you'll inform them that there's an issue, and if they want to buy the property, they may be liable for that.
That's a potential outcome, yes.
Okay,
But-
thanks.
But under the law, that doesn't take you off the hook. Right? It's all owners of the property,
Correct.
so you can't.
If it's a, accessible violation, yeah, that's correct.
Tom Weber? Hand up?
Hi, Chris, thank you. I have actually a few questions, so I don't know, am I limited to just one question or may I pose a few?
Is it like between 1 and 20 or 1 and 3?
No, it's really between 1 and 3. So,
Okay, okay.
so, and of course, I'll ask the questions and then I'll mute again. Just for reference point, you know, I sit on the township planning commission, and you know, we are facing a lot of housing issues, and we're also facing a lot of wetlands issues, and we're addressing it in our master plan. And you know, I know the village right now is about to undertake their master plan, but it was mentioned earlier that part of the use of that property in the master plan was to keep it as recreational or as public. That was the way that it was looked at through the master plan. And I'd encourage, you know, the village council to refer to that, because, you know, a master plan has a considerable amount of public input behind it, or it should, if it really wants to hold its weight. So, you know, consider that. The other thing is there really a rush to have to do something with this property? I mean, there are a lot of terrific ideas going on, and maybe one public hearing is not enough. Maybe there needs to be a second one, you know, when more people from the village return, you know, that are absent. But why is there a rush at this point? I know that a lot of work has been done to this point, but why not take a little bit longer and see what goes on with some of the feedback from the public? And additionally, you know, the idea that this property has some development potential, you know, I don't know necessarily outweighs the ability or the result of trying to rewild it and put it back to where it was. It sounds like there were a number of things that the village is not proud of that happened in the past that got us to the place where we are, and maybe it's time to make some things right. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah. Okay. So any other public questions? Okay, if we have none, then
Just one thing, President, that I can clarify regarding how the environmental review process works. Phase 1 just identifies whether there's something that needs to be investigated further in phase 2. Once you've got those two reports, what either the owner or the purchaser is required to do is create what's called a baseline environmental review. And based on that, either the owner or the potential purchaser has to commit to a specific plan going forward as to how the property is going to either be remediated, capped, or just depending on what type of contamination it is. And that's what determines then the environmental immunity or from liability going forward. So that would be the next step that would happen if there was a specific plan in place, would be the baseline remediation plan. That's what happens after that.
okay, so
No.
oh, okay,
wait,
I saw your hand. I'm sorry. We'll close the public hearing here at 8:30, and now that we'll give the council some discussion concerning the 7th Street property. So we'll.
I have things to say too.
Okay.
Will, why don't you let me go first? Because I'm mentioning you.
Okay.
Okay, first I want to thank Will Harper. He was the one who first challenged the idea of the development of Maud Court. And I think I, for one, I was new, was clueless about all this, and he made this day happen when we are all here discussing the future of that property. So he deserves big credit. Secondly, I want to say that trees were taken down for all of our homes. Everybody who lives on North Shore lives on land that used to be pristine. Thirdly, I think people are more important than trees. I support Nicole Avery's support of option number 2. I would like to see either 2 habitat homes or a 4-unit apartment on the 7th Street edge of that property while keeping the rest of it wetland. That's my thoughts.
Oh, thanks. Will, you had your hand up?
Yeah, and I'd like, Jim and I have talked about this a little bit, but I would like to dispel the notion that I heard from a couple people in the public tonight that if 3 or 4 is off the table, but the notion that 4 homes and 4 additional REUs are going to have any impact on sewer revenue whatsoever is completely false. I mean, you can just do the math with the seat of your pants. There are over 600 REUs already in the village. Adding 3 would increase revenue by less than half of 1%. It would not affect your sewer bill, and I'm on the sewer board, and I can tell you, you would not see a single dime in a decrease in your sewer bill if they develop this property, not 1 cent. The same thing goes for property tax. You're gonna 3 homes, depending on how much they cost, in our property tax base is a tiny drop in the bucket. Your property taxes are not going to go down, folks, if they build 3 houses. It just is not a reality. Do the math. I mean, it's not hard math. It's actually very simple. There are costs associated with the sale of the property. Well, wait, let me go back to the property tax thing. Also, when you increase the number of homes, you also have to increase the services that the DPW and the village has to provide. Nothing is free. If you just had more homes and it would lower your taxes, then Detroit's taxes would be free. I mean, you have to provide services for every house. So that's where the tax base comes from. So no, there's no free money here by selling these lots. And the offset of the cost of sale, Joanne Swanson made a very good point that we have no accurate data on what this land is worth. In my opinion, it would be really not wise to proceed any farther, because we could get, with an engineering study or more, building this up to where it's sellable, and then learning that we can't develop it if Eagle comes in and says no, or the Army or Corps or soil erosion, or makes the plan, alters it so radically that it wouldn't be economically feasible. And then we've spent a bunch more money on this. We've already spent way too much money on this. And it's, down the watershed now. So the cost of getting the property properly appraised and the studies needed and all the engineering and everything that would need to go into all of this would offset any profit, in my opinion. Back when we had the appraisals and when we did have the cost estimates for building the cul-de-sac, for building Northport, it was looking real sketchy whether it was going to break even at that point. And if you know how cost overruns are with it was probably going to end up upside down, costing the village money in the long run. The village should not be a property developer. It should not be a property developing company. I've said that from the beginning. I don't think anybody here at this table wants to cut down trees at this point. As far as the hardscrabble lots, I mean, we can save that discussion for another day. I like a lot of the ideas. I think there's something to be said for compromise. The marina does need overflow parking. I know the trailers aren't pretty, but they have to go somewhere. And we did just decrease the size of our marina parking lot. We are going to lose access at the peer group building soon enough, that we've been kind of encroaching on and using their property for trailer parking. We're not going to be able to do that in the future. So we do have to think a little bit about saving some space for the village, and maybe we could make it more attractive. And that said, there might be room also for one multiplex development on the high ground next to the railroad easement, maybe, if people want to do that, but we're not gonna decide that tonight. I just wanted to point out that the economic benefits, everybody's seeing this as a big windfall for the village in terms of money. It's just not there. There is no there. There's no cash to be had. So just get that out of your heads. That's my point.
Thanks. Anyone else? Yeah,
I
sure.
have thoughts. but
Sure, go
I
ahead.
thought
Laura.
someone else would have stuff too. I mean, I have spent a lot of time on this, reviewing every document, reading everything multiple times, going and getting the original deeds from the Register of Deeds. Looking for additional paperwork, going and talking to assessors, going and talking to people at the county building. So I feel quite familiar with all the information that we have before us, as well as the public comment, because I am the one who put together the addendum. And I am in strong support of option number one. I think that two things can be true at the same time, or even three things. I think that we can need housing desperately, particularly workforce housing. I think we can want to protect and value the wetlands, and we can also really need help on the sewer. I don't think that that means we have to answer all of those questions with this one piece of property, and I don't think it makes sense to try and do so. The same thing that Will has said, that it is not a financial windfall. To me, the value of the wetland and the longevity and the fact that we are entrusted to be financially responsible of all assets, which does include land, it would have to be worth an exponentially large amount of money to be more valuable than the wetland and the longevity of having it as wetland for generations to come. Particularly because I'm on infrastructure and we have a lot of infrastructure projects that need done. And I am quite confident that beyond the costs of being able to sell it that would be involved, we could take that out and still not have enough money for just one infrastructure project. So I just don't see it as valuable enough, given the ability to hold on to it as wetland for the long run. Additionally, to me, how did we even get to where we can make this decision? It's not that I want to look to the past, but we were given the land for recreational public use. That is important to me as someone who is on land that was deeded and asked not to be split further. There are a lot of deed restrictions on my property because B. Bowen wanted to protect it. And so I very much understand that and feel that that is important for that legacy to continue. As well as the reverter that was done in 2018. I realized that we can develop it, we can sell it, we can, but I wouldn't have voted or wanted it to be reverted in the first place. And so I'm not going to develop on something that I wouldn't have agreed with in the first place. And then when you look at the portion that is filled in, why is it filled in? Why isn't it wetland too? I mean, that happened a long time ago, before we had construction code, before Eagle was doing things that it does now, before it was concerned about protections. If that wasn't filled in, it would still probably be wetland like it was, because it was adjoining the railroad, right? And that's why it was there in the first place. And it was originally going to be, I think, a golf course or something. I mean, many years ago.
Not much room there for a golf course.
No,
6
I mean,
acres.
and the wetland doesn't go
6
together.
acres.
But I'm just
Might
saying
be a hole.
that for me, I do think it is important, to me at least, that I think about how we're even in a place where we are given this choice. And I don't agree with how, I just don't agree with that. Then when it comes to the affordable and workforce housing, I think that it is crucially important that we continue to move forward, seeing how we can get workforce housing in a larger scale in this village. There are projects that are ongoing right now, but I don't think that that precludes us from doing additional work on it. However, I do think that there is limited bandwidth available for people to work on projects and get things going. If we are going to look to workforce housing, I think we have 24 properties that the village owns. You asked how many there are. Some of those are obviously not buildable because we own South Beach, we own the marina, we own Hazerat Park, we own tiny little pieces, we own part off South Shore. However, there are lots of other parcels, including this parcel that has a building on it that wants to be remodeled and be bigger. We own property that is off of Wing Street that is not in the middle of a wetland and going to cost 10 times more to build on. We own property across from near Bremen, across from the soccer fields. We own, I mean, there is a lot of other land. And I'm not saying that we need to build on any of those or that we need to partner, but I do think that if we're going to pursue workforce housing, we need to pick land that is financially possible to be workforce housing. When you have to have foundations that are going to have, you know, inspections every few inches because of contamination or because of the conditions of water that are there. If you're going to have dewatering the entire construction process, which all of the studies say this, they all say that we have to do all of these things. It is no longer workforce housing. I mean, the sewer is enough to stop a project for workforce housing. Add in additional extra costs, it becomes completely impossible. And then, like Will said, we're looking at single family homes that are going to be wealthy, expensive homes, which may help and add to our tax base, but I don't feel that the payoff is nearly enough. And then finally, with that, I mean, I feel that it should be a passive park like Bob has suggested. I think that we should renaturalize the area that is there. We can pursue brownfield for natural parks. You do not have to develop it. Jerry Schatz made us aware of that, and we looked into it, and it is definitely possible. I think that it could be called Maud Park as a nod to the railroad, because that is the name of that's the name of the trail. And so I think it could be, but if we made it an official parkland, in my view, and my understanding is that it would be protected with an additional layer than it is right now, because if you make it officially parkland and register that with the state, my understanding is that the only way that you can sell or develop it is if it goes to a public referendum vote. And to me, that is the best protection we can possibly give, because that would mean that you'd have to get enough people on board to sell it. And if that did happen in 50 years from now, then I guess that they're making the right choice then. But for me right now, that isn't the choice that I would like, and I would like to see it protected as best we possibly can.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
You or Jane or Garth? Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I'm new on the council, but I have been aware of this project since 2018. So we live over down on 6th and Mill. And, you know, it is a wetland. This is a wetland. And I personally don't think we need any more high-end houses to be built down there. And I take your point, it costs a lot of money to build in a wetland. Plus, a wetland is a very good thing to protect the bay. And we need to do that. I am concerned about the contamination that was found. And I'm concerned about groundwater contamination in that site, whether we use it as a park where people go and children eat the dirt, or what, right? Because, you know, groundwater contamination is a big problem. Now, maybe it's not that way, but I think we ought to find out. And the contaminants that are there are consistent with fuel contaminants. So, you know, we know that there were underground tanks there and above ground tanks there. Yeah, people had no clue apparently back then that this was going to go right into the bay, right? And we need to protect the bay. It has a lot of challenges right now. I mean, all the people there on the shore of the bay, whether north or south, were probably in a wetland before they were built those things there. But they're built there. And I feel that I actually like the number one. To Will's point, I might be able to be talked into number two, because we already have hardscape there. If we needed it, but I don't really see a need for it. And I don't think that it gives you enough housing for anything from just that paved part there. So that's.
It's not paved, it's gravel.
Okay, gravel. So that's where I stand on it currently.
I have a follow-up, but you guys haven't had a chance yet, so.
Yeah, you know, been involved in this from the beginning and have learned a lot along the way. At this point, I'd really like to pursue option 2. And it really would be still an exploration of how we go about, whether it's through a conservation easement or dedicating the wetlands area as a park. But in the R2 residential area, we could have 250 by 100-foot lots off of 7th Street for habitat homes and encourage the, if not reforestation, a lot of planting to try to remediate what damage we did by using that as a recycling center, brush collection, dump, DPW. And it will, we can't make a decision, but I would like to pursue that option.
Yes, I'm like anybody else here, I think, that's been my playground for 65 to 70 years. I live on 6th Street. I used to ride the train from 6th Street down to the end of the tracks and come back. My neighbor was the conductor. I think if anything else, I think we have a consensus here that we could eliminate number 3 right now. Because I think everybody wants to keep that wetlands exactly where it is. It is wet back there. It always has been, probably always will be. Whether we go with 1 or 2, I think we're just gonna have to plan on making the right decision based on this people's input, based on what we feel, but as long as 3's off the table, I'm comfortable either way.
Yeah, that's well said. I think I echo the sentiment in terms of being involved with this process from the beginning to when, I mean, I was on the planning commission in 2018 when we were Jerry worked with us to come up with the ideas and it sort of just, that's when it went away, but then it did come back when I was on finance, and like Jane, I have learned a lot over the last couple of years. Being on council and being involved with just working in the public sector, you know, it's much different than running your own business. But I would, you know, I'm leaning towards the second option because it would give us the exploration of some type of housing on there. And I know that when, you know, when people say, you know, those houses, if there's a couple units there, it might not make a difference. But, you know, I would push back against that and say the 6 units that we do have in our community do make a difference. Because Christy Fisher, who lives on West Street, owns a business in Northport. Adam Brown, who lives over in Vincer North, is a part owner in Bayshore Propane and Oil. So those affordable units have given people the opportunity to live here and own here. And we know because of Housing North's work that they've done in the Grand Traverse region, Leelanau County and stuff, you know, we don't necessarily need homes for people to buy in this community. We need things for people to rent. People need rental options. That's what Northport has eliminated. Nobody can get their foot in the door here. You know, it's either you buy it and you own it, or you don't live here. Yeah, and there are some exceptions. And I will say that, you know, we've had a lot of meetings with people on housing. Josh Mills from Frankfurt, you know, you go to Frankfurt, you go down to their beach right there. There's a big public housing unit. You know, that big building that's there, that's housing, low income housing for people right on Lake Michigan. And so we are charged with a difficult task. There's no doubt about that. And you know, whether we go with number 1, people will say you missed an opportunity with housing or something. If you go with number 2, people will say we missed an opportunity to reclaim. But you know, we're trying to make these decisions with what's best for the community and the neighbors, but also the greater village. And so that's what we have to think about. And I want to thank the planning commission. I want to thank the citizens, everybody for their inputs. And I do want people to know, just because maybe I haven't been in every planning commission and stuff, doesn't mean we don't stay up with these things. We've read all the public comments. I mean, hundreds of pages. You know, one thing is clear to me. People love Northport. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I've been fortunate to live here for my entire life. You know, I'm going to be 44 next week. it's an easy place to love.
You got a birthday next week?
No. But anyway, I just want to say, thank everybody, and those are my comments that again, but it's gonna be tough. But I think we have an opportunity to explore what we can do there. I mean, certainly protect the wetlands, but if there's housing to be done, then maybe we can do it, and if not, then we can always go back to number one. So that's sort of why I'm leaning
Yes.
in that direction.
Yep.
That was my follow-up.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to point out what Nicole said earlier, highlight that because there's a chance that neither one of these lots, or it may become, we go to these groups, Housing North or Larry Mobby or whoever, and they're just gonna look at it and say, yeah, it doesn't work. But we try that, and if that fails and we can't find a solution that works in terms of a benefit to the affordable housing need, that is financially doable, we can always revert back to option one and replant it. The other thing the other point I wanted, Laura made some great points too about the cost of, you can't put a dollar value on a wetland, but and our responsibility as stewards, not just financial, but in terms of the natural resources, we're stewards of that too. But Jim's point about the dam, and I hope everybody at home took a drink when he mentioned wherever. That's anyway. Yeah, so, but no, it's a good point. In that before we go diving into a soil remediation, sometimes it's better to leave it alone. We need to know if anything is actually moving in that area. If it's not moving, sometimes you just don't dig it up unless you have to. And so like, I don't want to, if we end up doing option one and not building anything before we do an environmental cleanup, which could be catastrophically expensive, we need to know if it's actually leaching anywhere. If any of those chemicals are moving, or not. And I don't think they're probably very near the surface anymore. I'm not too worried about kids eating dirt, but yeah, like I said, before we go in with the backhoes and bulldozers and the men in white suits, no, I mean, that's what it takes. It's ridiculously expensive. And so before we do that, we got to make sure we actually have a problem. So that's it. That's just my follow-up. I think everybody had great comments, and the public too. I want to thank everybody.
So I just want to follow up on what Will said. In the environmental study too, they do mention there are two locations where they do think that they probably are migrating in water. So there probably is migration happening. We just don't, and their answer to that was pay us to test again in 6 months. So, I mean, and obviously we weren't doing that. And my other point from previous, in terms of let's pursue and see if we can put housing here and if it'll be too expensive or if it won't, and then we can always go back to number one. The reason that I feel like that isn't worth it to me is because, again, our bandwidth and our available time spent. If we already know that it is likely too expensive and we have other locations that we could also pursue, we could do both at the same time, but that is probably going to make it more challenging to accomplish and find out which one might be more viable. And to me, it seems more prudent to focus on other lots that potentially could move forward that we know aren't in wetlands with all of these costs. And that's part of why that is not something that I see as worth the time. And I do understand your points though, on looking at it and to pursue and see if it would be worth it or not.
Well, I'll let you go and just say it. It's when, we have this, the village, the township, the library board, the school have entered into this audit. They're coming in and they're looking at all of our properties and things like that. And that's actually something that will help you say, you have this property, this is its best use. You have this property, this is its best use. And I don't know when that's going to be finished. But that's something that's collectively going on between the township, the library board, the village, and the school, to look at all of our properties, and make sure they're being used in the best way. And so that's something that's a tool, like you said, how are we going to make these decisions? Your emails have been very great, but you had a list of about 20 questions at the end of one of them. And you know what, I was just thinking in my head, I said, That's a job for Jim. I will say too, and as someone who's in a leadership role, you know, some of the issues that we faced before were because, you know, we just weren't in the best position. As a community, as a council, but I believe we are now. I believe we have positioned ourselves, this council, has positioned this community in a way that we have a fully staffed office here. We have a fully staffed DPW department, so that when issues like this and others that will come our way, we now have the tools in the toolbox to properly assess and address the issues. You know, it's been very uncomfortable to be a council member, and you're all kind of looking at each other like, who's gonna do this thing? Are you gonna follow up? And we've probably fallen behind on things, and that's okay to admit a mistake. But to know we're in a position now to where, I don't think we're gonna make those same mistakes, and if we do, you know, we have citizens who will hold us accountable. But I believe we're in a position now where it's like, the citizens in this village council are now gonna work together on not only this project, but many other projects in Northport, so that everybody feels that they have ownership in it. Because it's our community, it's our town, and we all wanna be a part of it and be involved. So I just wanted to address that. Like I said, you've been very helpful to this council, with your input.
Been a thorn in your side.
Every rose has its thorn.
Wow.
That's okay. Yeah, you can.
This meeting tonight had all the possibilities of getting out of hand. And to see both sides very cordial means a lot to this council. Hopefully it means a lot to you guys as well.
And I think what it means is you end up with a better decision coming out of a meeting like this than out of a meeting like a lot different.
Yeah, I just want to mention just a couple of things that, you know, I'm very opposed to parking anything on this thing. But the other thing that hasn't been mentioned so far is a wetland. It attracts mosquitoes.
Yeah.
There's a huge spike in Lyme disease and anaplasma in Michigan at the moment, and it's moving north. So even though we'd like everything to be pristine, we don't want people getting Lyme disease and anaplasma. Just saying.
Lyme disease is from ticks, not mosquitoes.
Yes, Lyme is from ticks, but mosquitoes are bringing
Oh, yeah.
other stuff like things.
See the doctor.
Started about has got West Nile disease and southern
Yeah.
Michigan.
And equine encephalitis.
And I can read too, Will. I don't have to be a doctor to read that. Sorry,
He
but
knows me.
one other thing too, and I'd like to clarify.
Just wait, I'll give you one sec. So the village council discussion, I think we're all set on that, correct? So the next is a public comment. It does say topics other than addressed in the public hearing.
I'm only gonna ask, can you make a motion to eliminate number 3 from the consideration? So at least we know we don't have to worry about that anymore, since it seems to be.
Even if they did at this point, it wouldn't be binding in any sense to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what I would recommend that you do is to direct your village manager to give you I would say, a recommendation out of this meeting, say your May meeting. So, and the reason being is it gives the people that are here, okay, here's the next time we have to be concerned about this issue. This is the next time it will be discussed by the council. At least you're not leaving it in limbo that it's gonna be, well, we don't know when. You know, but you'll get a recommendation or some form of, you know, here's where we might go as a next step. And say the May meeting, I think that'd be a reasonable period of time to do that.
The May meeting?
Yeah.
So to direct the manager
Why
to.
not April?
Well,
It's been going on so long.
Yeah, we're getting there.
My only comment, Chris, I'd like to make is when I made my comment about putting the money on the sewer, and like a couple other people did, there was no comment in there about it would help our taxes or it'd help our costs for sewer. We were just saying, put the money towards the sewer, just as a general, just to help out a little bit. We all know it's not gonna help us on our taxes, And we certainly all know it's not gonna cut our sewer bill down. It was just a suggestion of the use of the money.
I think, even though we can't vote on it, I think there's enough to say that there is a consensus that number 3 will be ruled out.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
I didn't mean to say you can't vote on it, but I just, it would be, there would be nothing that would be binding.
If it would make people feel better.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if a motion is made, but it's gotta, if a motion comes to the floor, we'll entertain it.
Like, I don't know, Jimmy, you have to help me here, like, could we have like just a vote of consensus that we are not this council at this time is not in favor of option 3?
Or we could,
That's what I'm saying, you could have a vote like that.
I know it's not binding, but it just, I think people want us to at least
or
say something.
another option would be to direct the zoning administrator, village manager
Yeah,
to explore the options 1 and 2.
that's the same thing, yeah, that's
And
better.
make a recommendation to
Good.
us
In May.
in,
In May, yeah,
in
let's
May.
do that.
okay, I make that in the form of a motion.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
All right, moved by Jane, supported by Will to
Direct the
village manager to explore options 1 and 2 and to bring us a recommendation at our May meeting.
But that doesn't eliminate 3, unfortunately.
Well, but yeah, but he's not gonna, it's
Can't
$1,500.
pursue 3. I mean, that's not
mean,
pursue 3.
We're not letting him work on 3, so.
I don't mean to be greedy.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Alright,
Any opposed nays? Okay, the motion passes. Manager will explore options 1 and 2 only. Okay, so that, we're kind of just bouncing around here. Is there any other public comment? Other topics other than addressed in the public hearing?
I just want to thank Laura for all her work. I appreciate the amount and how she found what we all said. And that was an impossible situation, and I don't know how you did it, but it's fantastic. It's great reading for days and days and days. So, I mean, nobody else, I think, could have done such a great job as you did, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we have to put up with it.
I wish you'd run for president.
yeah, well, who are about this? Would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
Is there any other council comment? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. I couldn't believe it.
Well, I think you're finished. The staff over and under, I was for the duration of the.
Oh, wow.